Good afternoon, everybody. This session is just going to be about a story. A story that I don't tell very often because it's so bizarre, so peculiar, so tailor-made to me that I've found so many lessons in it. But it was so bizarre. And it started January 21st, 2022. On that particular day, I loaded up all my possessions into a truck I had, 2010 GMC Sierra, and I was headed south. It was a very cold day, and I had just gotten 300 copies of One Poetic Dreamer, published, printed, sent to my house, and I was on a mission to go to Florida and sell those books, play piano, busk, and send a message to the world, whatever that would have been. Now, the first thing I did was go to the gym, which I had frequented since 18 years old. And there I ran into Matthew, Ricky, and the gym manager. And I sold each of them a book. And that was the start of momentum. And then I went to Red Pepper Restaurant and I sold 5 more books. Got a free meal, hit the road. Now, I drove for about 10 hours just before coming into New Orleans. I started to hear a knock on the truck and the engine, very loud, very repetitious. So I immediately went to go see a mechanic. And he told me I was fucked. And I was at a loss. He said you could risk driving another 100 miles and the truck might make it, but it's not going to make it another 1,000. And I was about 600 miles deep into the journey, and I had one night reserved in New Orleans, which was about 70 miles away. So before making this decision to go back to Oklahoma or continue forward, I pulled off into a car wash that had been abandoned for a while. And I sat and I prayed and I questioned, what the hell am I going to do now? And I spoke to God, I spoke to Matthew, I spoke to whoever would listen. And in that moment, I got some clarity. I got a response. Pen and paper, wrote down, here's what I need to do. First, go to New Orleans, stay the one night at the hostel I had booked. Sell the truck. Get a rental car. Bring all my possessions back to Lawton, Oklahoma. And so I trusted that was the right thing to do. And I went forward. And I drove from there immediately to the hostel I had booked. Now, I only stayed one night at this hostel. But in that one night, I knew I had to come up with a plan. Step by step, of exactly what I needed to do, which was find a place that I could put my possessions, sell the truck, because I had a lot of stuff in the bed of the truck, and do it very quickly, get a rental car, drive back. Now, upon this night at the hostel, I met some people and I managed to sell one book. And they had a whiteboard and I wrote a poem. I don't remember what it was about, but I wrote it because it just happens. And the next morning, about 4 a.m., I woke up and I went to meditate and pray, because that happens quite a bit. The early morning spirit grabs me and it helps me and it gives me guidance and clarity and peace, and I trust it. And then a few hours later, the girl working the front office, her name was Maria. I saw her as I was eating breakfast. I saw her walking upstairs into the building. And she was magnificent. Oh, long dark hair, Latina, striped pants, just gorgeous. And I let her settle in, and then I went to go speak with her. And immediately she was like, "You're the one who wrote the poem." And of course I did. And she and I spoke for a couple hours, and she just melted my heart. And it was a pain to have to check out of there and go about my business, having to say goodbye to her. But I did manage to find a place on Craigslist with a dude who needed some quick cash and had some empty space in his apartment. And so immediately I drove the truck over there, not too far away. And this man's name was Chris. He was about 40 years old, short white guy. And he had an apartment, maybe 500 or 600 square feet, 1 bedroom, empty living room, kitchen, bathroom. And pretty much all he had in there was some clothes and a bed. And I just moved all of my stuff immediately into his apartment. Very peculiar happening, to meet a stranger and then move in with them. For 3 days was the deal. 3 days. And so I brought in the piano, and he just lit up, because apparently he knew how to play piano, and he was very good. He just made up rhythms and melodies and harmony just out of nothing, and did not appear to be the kind of guy who could do so. And so, as uncomfortable as the situation was, and there was nowhere for me to go because I was not going to drive the truck. So for 3 days, I was either sitting in the truck, writing, meditating, or I was sitting in his apartment, just waiting. And fortunately, I got a posting on Craigslist, and then somebody replied to buy the truck, knowing there was damage to the engine. So they came and they checked it out, and they said, 2 days, I'll be back, and we'll get the title settled. I'll pay you $3,900, which I paid about $8,200 for the truck less than a year before. But I'm going to take a hit wherever, to keep moving on. And the truck was like a boat to cross a river. And when I crossed the river, you let go of the boat. And that's the way a lot of the possessions we have are meant to be used. You either carry it for a long time, or you use it as needed and then learn when to let go. And on this occasion, I just had to let go because the mechanic I had spoken to told me, you're going to need a new engine or rebuild. And that's about $5,000. And I had about $1,000 at this time. And that was just not going to happen. So, one of these nights with Chris, who had been in the Army years prior, had severe PTSD and paranoia. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, he wakes up and he starts yelling. He just starts yelling very loud, complaining about the neighbor playing music too loud. And in between his yelling, silence. So he was stuck in a memory of trauma with loud noises, I'm sure, triggered it. And for about an hour, I just sat there and dealt with it, laying on the floor, and he just paced the apartment. And finally, I had to just break him out of it. So I went to the bathroom alone, focused, come up with an idea to help settle him down. And the only thing I had to beat crazy was crazier. So as soon as I stepped out of the bathroom, I just started yelling, "Can't you hear this fucking music? They just need to turn it down," for 5 minutes. Until finally his mind was beat. I had to shake him out of it. And whenever I stopped, he looked at me and said, "Are you fucking with me?" And I said, Of course I'm fucking with you. It's silent. It's quiet. You're the one making the noise, being the disturbance. He was living in the past. I had to bring him into the moment through an outrageous expression of anger. But in that, I was totally conscious of what I was doing. And it settled him down because immediately I went and sat down on a pillow, cross-legged, and just let him speak, listen to him, talk about the events of that day, his upsets with his neighbor, and he shared with a story about a time he spent in Afghanistan where he was confronted with a decision as a soldier, where in front of him stood a child with a handgun, pointing it at him, and he had a gun in his hand, and it was either kill or be killed. And so he shot this child in the face. It's heavy. That's something he's got to live with, and it's heavy. And I just listen. That's all I do with people. I say what needs to be said, but I mostly listen. And that creates a space, an environment for people to open up, to come out of the heavy worldly drama, the psychological reruns that we all endure day after day of the same thoughts, same worries. What's going to happen to me? But I do my meditations in order to create a space where I am the space. And all this stuff that passes is just passing show. It's clouds in the sky. I am the sky. And so on this particular night, which was the last night I was there, I calmed him down. And finally, I got to go to sleep. And the next day, all was fine. The relationship between me and him was cooled out. I went and I sold the truck. I came back with a rental car, packed up my stuff, went directly to go see Maria at the hostel. Luckily, she was there. And I gave her a poem, and I just she touched that place in me that was love. She was the key that unlocked it. And that was a hard thing to say goodbye. I gave her a book, and part of me always wanted to see her again, but knew it was never going to cross paths. We would never do that again. And then I returned home after a 10-hour drive, and I walked in the door and just laid down on the floor. And my mother comes into the room, and we talked for a bit, but the only thing I really remember was her saying, "You're going the wrong way." And I knew what she was talking about, but I still continued to fight it for months. However, there were times when I would just calm down, and what she meant, whether she recognized it or not, was that I was trying to go out. I was trying to go outwards into the world some more. But I knew I needed to go inwards, and so I did. And all the meditations, days, months, weeks, years, haven't really done much with the world. But in here, just growing a tree. And at that time it was a sprout, but it's gonna keep growing, and eventually it will bear fruit. Magnificent, delicious fruit. And that'll come at an unexpected time, only as long as I continue to water the spiritual tree through the sadhana, through the meditation, through the resolution of old patterns, increasing the faith, deepening the faith in me, in God, that this life is not just what we think, what we smell, taste, touch, hear, see. There's more to life than all of that, than emotions, than thoughts, than these words and these stories. It's beyond all of that. And that's the place where I touch. And I try to stay there. But I keep coming down into the form, into my own drama, my own ego. And what I've learned is that I keep pushing things away, or I keep grabbing things, but if I'm going to really be free, liberated, then I can't have any attachments or aversions. And I am the vagabond. I am the breaker of bonds. I am James Vagabond. And it doesn't mean to live completely renunciated from the world and to give up everything, but to not need it, to live without desire, to live in the Dharma, in the flow, in the way of things, so that I am always peaceful, I am always equanimous, and I can maintain this sense of identity that is associated with awareness, with spaciousness, with calmness, with truth. And these stories that I endure, walk into, invite into my life are full of surprises and suffering and pain and pleasure and teaching moments that help me and somehow impact others. But my goal isn't to impact other people. It's not to influence people. All the work I do is on myself, and if it touches another life, so be it. But my intentions are to become liberated. And so every story, every pattern, every dilemma, every problem is just manure. It's water, it's sunlight for the spiritual growth. In order to become infinite, free, boundless, and not just intellectually know it, but to have that in my everyday experience. Some could call it enlightenment, but it's the process. It's the everyday that matters so much more. Some people will strive for financial freedom. Some people will strive for material freedom, for freedom for time. But what does it mean to be spiritually free? That's what I'm shooting for. That's what I want to experience and attain, that liberation. And in order to do so, you can't have bonds. You can't have bonds that own you, own me, that keep me locked into a personality, to a place, to a concept of who I am. I have a body. I am a body. I have a personality. I am a personality. I have a soul. I am a soul. I have a God. I am God. To be all of these levels at once, all of these layers, the form and the formless, but not to be stuck in any one of those, to be able to move through them all simultaneously, to be able to see other people as their body, as their personality, as their astral sign, as their soul, as me, as life, as gods in drag, to see every being in that light. That's enlightenment. That's liberation. That's truth. That's seeing. That's beyond what most people ever perceive. That's the spiritual way. And every clue I get, every direction, every piece of guidance, every newfound lesson, every spark of wisdom is all fuel for the fire of dislodging me from any particular stance, model, expectation, desire, in order to be free. And I'm just going to keep gathering stories and meditating, not because I'm seeking those, but because they're just happening. Life is working on me. I'm working on life. I am life. I am Ken Das. I am the universe. I am that I am. And you are too. So, thanks for listening to the story, I suppose, if you listened at all. And you have yourself a wonderful day. Ken Das out!